All right, hey, what up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. Back for our weekly football talk, and we already have questions in there. So, Pat M, I appreciate you for um, already commenting and questioning on things. Spice, get out of the way. All right, so let's see. Split field quarters toolbox. What is your camp rules? Poach solo if 3 is attached, stubby if 3 is removed. What about when back is 4 strong? Is it more of a field boundary check? Okay, so let's start with the first question right away. Ripping and running. Absolutely love it, Pat. We do not. So we're a 3 high defense currently. We, excuse me, we do not play poach. We played 0 snaps last year where we borrowed the backside safety. So 3-by-1 tight or 3-by-1, 3 attached. Our middle safety was responsible for 3. We did not borrow the backside safety. So we would be a 3-2 box. Sam, as an apex player, we were playing palms off of 1 and 2, but our middle safety was responsible for 3 vertical. And then that allowed us to play the backside single the way we wanted to play it. Anytime you're poach solo and you have to borrow the backside safety, you now get into a situation where you're man-to-man on the single, man-to-man on the back. Obviously, you're asking the question so you understand that scenario. But in the 3 high world, when we could live in it, our middle safety was responsible for 3 vertical. He was running the alley. So we stayed in 3-by-1 tight end attached formations. We stayed in our base defense, which allowed us to play palms with the middle safety playing 3 vertical. And then the backside could play whatever they want to fit. They wanted to play to the single. And I will be honest with you, Pat, we saw that formation less than 2% of the time. So 3-by-1 tight end attached to the trip side. We almost never saw that formation. So, if it was something that we were seeing a bunch of and we couldn't handle it from tight 3 high, obviously we would have adjustments. We play a bunch of 3 buzz to where, hey, King, how are you doing, sir? We play a bunch of 3 buzz to where we drop the middle safety in between the Sam and the Mike, and now we end up, traditional 8-man front stuff. So we have other answers, things that we do, but I can tell you 100% we played 0 snaps in poach last year as a 3 high team. We never used the backside safety to the front side of 3-by-1. All right. How do you install poach solo against 3-by-1, then teach stress, special, etc.? 3-by-1 checks more based on the alignment of number 3, the field and boundary, and your kids learn to make those. So if you were going to live in the poach world and you wanted to take a look at splits, who 3 was, where 3 was, when you needed to poach, when you didn't need to poach. To me, it's more of a personnel type deal. If you play with a true Sam backer that cannot match anything vertical, you're not a 3 safety defense. You're old school 4-3, 3-4, whatever it may be. Then obviously poach solo might be the first thing that you have to get into, right? So stump, can you play stump with that personnel? Yes, you can. Can you play special or stubby? Probably not, because your Sam can't match 2 vertical. For us, we're a 3 high safety team, whether we've been 3 high safeties or 3 safeties. So when we were 4-2-5, stubby was always, to us, one of the first adjustments or whatever, however you would look at it. So I'm not I don't use Saban terminology. I'm an Alabama fan. I get it, but I don't use that terminology. So to us, our first 3-by-1 check was always what we call mix. So it's X out 1, palms on 2 and 3, backside safety can stay to the single side. I personally feel in high school football that the single side is where teams are going to live. They're going to look for their best receiver to the single, or they're going to run the ball to the single. So I never want it to be a poach, solo, stress, whatever the coverage is. I never wanted to borrow the backside safety. That's just my personal opinion, my philosophy. So, even when we were a 4-2-5 team playing with three safeties, our first adjustment was what we would call mixed coverage, right? So um, X out one, palms on 2 and 3, playing it with the two safeties. So three safety systems. So you have a nickel, star, whoever you want to consider, and then you have a high safety to the backside. We always left the backside safety to the single. That's how we play day one. That's the first 3-by-1 we put in. We're not a poach team. We're not a solo team, stress team, whatever the terminology is that you want to use. So for us, day one, that's what we do. That's how we do it. And then I always looked at it as you have to have a coverage that is good to the single. And then your next adjustment should be a coverage that either floods or takes care of the trip. So for us, our system, first coverage was always something that took care of the single. So our first adjustment was always something that left 2 for 1, 3 for 2 to the single. So if we involved the will linebacker to the single, it was 3 for 2, 2 for 1. If they were 4 strong and we had to use the will or somebody else over to the strong side, then we were 5 for 4 to the strong side, 2 for 1 to the backside. Day one, right? Camp rules. Then when you get into a situation where you have teams that can exploit you to the trip. So my thing to you, Pat, would be how many teams on your schedule can exploit you to the trip side? How many teams to the trip side are going to throw spacing? They're going to throw combinations to the trip side that you absolutely have to defend the trip side of the concept. I've been doing this for 25 years, been in high school football for 25 years. Teams in 3-by-1 do not dominate to the three receiver side. They dominate to the single side. That's what they do time and time again. That's what every offensive coordinator wants to go to. They want you to borrow the backside safety to the trip side, and they want to exploit you with runs and passes to the single. Just my experience, just my opinion. So we always handle it in our two base deals. You've got a deal that is good to the single, and you got a deal that floods or is good to the, whether it's stress, poach, solo, whatever you feel. To me, playing the poach world, I still think you can get beat to the trip side with spacing. I still think you don't have enough underneath players to defend people that are going to attack you to the trip side. So we always rolled to it, kicked the coverage to it, tried to get in a scenario where we could have a flat player, a curl player, and a hook player to the trip side, which leaves us man-to-man on the backside. But if I'm going to be man-to-man on the backside and I'm going to give up the potential of weaker run support, one-on-one scenarios to the man side, I want to make sure that I have the trip side covered. So to me, the poach solo stress world, I think you're still short when it comes. Now, you can handle 3 vertical with the backside safety. You can do all those things. But if they want to live in a spacing, intermediate passing concept world where they can put more routes into the trips concept than you can put underneath defenders, I think you need to have another answer. So I never carried poach, solo, stress, whatever you want to call it. I never carried that as one of our components. I don't like doing that. I think it leaves you man-to-man on a single, but I think they can also, an offense can still, if you're playing your traditional palms rules to the 3 receiver side, so the apex is in between 2 and 3, and you're playing palms off 1 and 2, and somebody from the backside is playing 3 vertical, I still think they can take 3 receivers and run spacing concepts, underneath concepts that will put you in a scenario where you don't have enough underneath droppers. So my camp rule deal was always, this is the coverage that we start with because I feel great to the single. This is the coverage we go to because I feel great to the trips. And then based on who we were playing, what they were doing, that would determine how we wanted to play 3-by-1 open or 3-by-1 tight. I never, ever use poach, stress, solo. Now, with that being said, let's keep this in mind. I never played with 4-3 personnel or true 3-4 personnel. I wasn't playing with a true Sam backer that could not match a number 2 vertical. We were a 4-2-5 team. We were a 3-3-5 team. So my answer to that would be, from our personnel group, from what we do, our camp rule was mixed coverage first, right? However you want to whatever terminology you use. X out 1, read on 2 and 3. That's number 1. We always rolled or clouded or kicked the coverage to that side next, because I wanted a corner down to be flat. I wanted the apex to be curl, and I wanted the Mike or an inside backer to be hook. I wanted to flood the trip side of the concept, because I felt like that was the next thing that we were going to see. So that's just my philosophy, my take, how I choose to do things. Okay, so all right, let me go backwards. So, do you have 2-man in your 3 safety defense? We play 2-man on nickel downs, on third downs. We do not play 2-man as a base structure. We don't carry 2-man as a base structure. We play it on third downs only, King, if that answers your question. I do not like fitting runs from 2-man. I do not like playing. I know in 7-on-7, that's the first thing that you're going to see all the time, but I don't like fitting runs from it. I don't like playing 2-man as a base deal. 2-man for us is a dime nickel extra package that we play. All right, Pat, when you're playing mix, say against 10 personnel, do you bump the front and stay tight, or bump backers? All right, if we're tight, we bump backers. The thing with the front, Pat, that I would do is if it's 10 personnel 3-by-1, then we're probably going to, for us in tight, we're going to bump the backers. If I was an over front team, I would probably leave the 3 technique away from the trips to the single, and I would leave the open B gap to the side that I had the overhang, because I feel like that is where we can do some things to affect the open B gap with the overhang. We can do some things with the defensive end. We can stunt, gap out, 2 gap that defensive end. So for us in our traditional over front, we would set the 3 technique to the single. We would leave the solo backer in the box, and then the apex would be walked out to become the fold player into the B gap, or the extra player into the B gap. The RPO world changed that a little bit, where you're putting the open B gap. To me, offenses that are spread, RPO, however you want to look at it, they want to exploit the B gap bubble. That's the world they want to live in. So for me, if we set the 3 technique to the trip side, now the fall in gap for that guy is a little bit further. I want the fall in gap for that guy to be a little bit closer. So for us as an overfront team, we always set the 3 to the single, and then we adjusted our backers off of that. So old school for us, when we were 4-2-5, the Will was the soloed backer. The Mike bumped out to be, the overhang / defender that was outside the 5 technique. And then we were playing our mixed coverage off of that. And then we were trying to either game or send the runs out to the overhang player. So 3-by-1 with an open B gap, that defensive end for us, that's a 5 technique, might be a 2 gap player. He might be a guy that's got an open B gap that says, look, any blocks that come at you, any aggressive blocks that are coming to your face, you can cross face, win in the B gap, and send the ball 1 gap further out. That's just the way we chose to play defense. Have you ever studied dollar defense, or Marcus Freeman was there going to use that against 11 personnel? I have. I've looked at some of the Cincinnati 3 high stuff. I don't think I can say that I've studied what Marcus Freeman does in dollar. I believe when I was studying Cincinnati, their 3 high stuff was predominantly middle of the field closed, 1 high. I study more Iowa State stuff. We're a quarters-based toolbox. That's who we are. We're a middle of the field open team. That's who we are. So anybody that starts 3 high but plays middle of the field closed predominantly is not somebody that I've studied extensively in the past, because that's not the world that we live in. So To say that I've watched Cincinnati, yes, I have. To say that I watched Cincinnati when Marcus Freeman was there, yes, I have. Um, to say that that's what we do, no, we don't. In again, my opinion only. When I watch that stuff, I think Cincinnati in their heyday was one high. I think they were middle of the field closed predominantly. Um, we live in a middle of the field open quarters world. So, did I look at Cincinnati stuff? Yes, I did. Did I find anybody that I thought was three high? Yes, I did. Um, at the end of the day, when I choose to study or when I choose to look at who's playing certain things, I always try to match it to what we do. And I never thought Cincinnati was conducive to what we do. And again, that I wouldn't say that I studied it extensively. Um, I just, for me, when I look at it and I watch clips, I roll through clips and in my mind, I think they're more one high and we're not one high. So as soon as I start to watch that, I kind of gravitate away from it. Now, again, not to say that that's not good, not to say that that's not effective, not to say that, you know, um, that's not the way to play defense. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're middle of the field open. I'm a quarters toolbox guy. I don't gravitate towards people that play middle of the field closed. And that's just the impression I got from Cincinnati. I don't know if I might be wrong. I don't know. But the impression I got from Cincinnati when I watched was they were more middle of the field closed, one high. Um, Baz, you would have to explain to me what the dollar package is. I'm not familiar with it. Handle odd fronts. I see the trend of inline tight ends returning about. Yeah, I think we certainly year two of us being a tight front team, we saw way more inline tight ends. We saw way more three-man surfaces. Um, my initial thought as a tight front team was I was not checking out a tight front when you put a tight end in. And the reason for that was if I want to be tight because of the issues I think it creates, if every time you put a tight end in, I check out a tight, then you can dictate what I do. And that was the base thought. That was my philosophy. That's what I did going in. This past year, we struggle with three-man surfaces and inline tight ends and tight front. So I probably need to adjust my theories a little bit. As a tight front team, I can tell you this much. I tried to not get out of tight as much as I possibly could because I don't like a world where the offense dictates to you what you do. So if I'm a tight front team and you have personnel groupings or inline tight ends that get me out of tight, well, then I think you dictate to me when I'm going to be tight and when I'm not. So you go in and say, all right, look, if I put a tight end in, they shade the front, they kick the front, they move the front, I get them out of their defense. Well, then why wouldn't you game plan that way? Why wouldn't you game plan to say, I'm going to do all the things that get them out of the front that I don't want to see? And that's been my philosophy. That's been my, you know, personality as far as defense is concerned. I don't want you to dictate to me when I play tight and when I don't. We did not do a great job last year, whether it's personnel, philosophy, however you want to look at it. Our inline tight end stuff out of tight front was not good last year. So I obviously need to make an adjustment. I need to make a change there. But I still, from a philosophy standpoint, I don't like checking because of your personnel or your formations, inline tight end, whatever it may be, because I think then you dictate to me, and I don't like doing that. That's just, again, philosophically speaking, opinionated, how I feel about what we want to do on defense. But I can tell you I'm not ignorant or dumb. Tight front, inline tight ends for us last year was not very good. Year before it was okay. So we are certainly looking this year at how to handle those personnel groupings, formations a little bit different. We might not even be three high next year. I can't even tell you if we're going to be three high. I can't tell you if we're going to be tight front. If you ask me February 1st what we're going to do on defense next year, I don't know if I could tell you. I'm not really sure right now. Do you defend duo often? What are your preferences of defending 11 personnel duo, favorite stunts, blitzes, to use if it's hurting you. I don't think we see a ton of duo. I know the best team in our district last year and the team we played in the playoffs was a duo team. And um, the personnel grouping that they're using out of what they're trying to do out of it, what they're trying to, what they're trying to get to would certainly change. I look at it more from a gap accountability deal than I do from a duo deal. Um, if we're trying to push the ball out, most of the duo teams that are running it from the NFL style duo, they're okay with the ball bouncing. They're gonna pin everything inside. They're gonna condense formations. They're gonna make the ball go to a corner or somebody else. So, I think it's tough to sit back and say, all right, well, here's what we do versus duo teams, because I think if you try to gap exchange, gap exchange, stunt the front, do some different things to defend duo. Well, I think they're okay with the ball bouncing out there. They're okay with it getting out to a corner that's unblocked. So, you know, it's probably tough to determine because we don't see it enough to say what we actually do versus duo. You know, uh, Stunts, pressures, how we would do it. To me, it would be more of a analysis of saying, all right, well, if we're going to stun it and try and make the ball bounce, can we predetermine that the D line stunting can get backers over the top quicker? If they're reading the Mike linebacker and I stunt the front out and the Mike linebacker goes over the top to the C gap, does that make the back keep it inside based off of what his reads are? Does the back now have to keep it inside versus a scrape backer? And now I'm stunting inside. Is there any way I can get the backside will freed up to kind of change where now if they're going to hammer the A gap because I'm scrape exchanging or taking away inside gaps, if they're going to hammer that, how do I now handle the backside of that to get the will where I want them? Um, you know, to me, the duo deal is more like it, can we handle the double team on a three technique? How can we handle that to where they can't get great vertical movement? If they can't get great vertical movement, how do we change the leverage of what they're trying to block in the duo scheme? So obviously they're gonna, you know, do they run it? Do they like running it to the three to get the two double teams that they need? Do they like running it to a shade? Those are all things that you would have to consider. But I've never really looked at it from a defensive standpoint to say how we need to defend a duo play. I always look at it from a gap scheme standpoint to say, all right, how do we defend the gaps that we need to defend? What are we doing to take those gaps away? Where do we need to fit? If we're a standard over front team, and the Mike's got to be an A gap player on downhill inside flow with no pullers. Well, how are we going to handle the edge if they're going to pin everything down and bounce the ball to the edge? So, that's one of the deals that you have to consider. Um, I mean, Pat, I think it's wherever you are, whatever you see, predominantly that's what you see. So you base your game plan around that. If you move south and our game is more conducive to what colleges are doing, all right, we still got to defend it, right? We still have to understand how we need to defend it. So I don't know. There's times where I would love to see 20, 21, and 31. And then there's times where I would love to see 10. So I really, um, I can't give you an answer to say, move south. Um, to me, big personnel groupings are always, can you handle them, right? So I don't think schematically you get carried away with 21, 22, 32. To me, it's not a schematic issue. To me, it's more of an issue of, all right, who are their bodies? Who are your bodies? If I get bodies in the box to defend that, can I handle the box regardless of the scheme? If they're 32 personnel and just mauling you at the point of attack, well, tell me the defense you're going to play. I'll sign up and take that course. I'll take that certification every day of the week if you have a way to play 32 with inferior personnel. To me, the teams that are 21, 22, 32, they win when their personnel's better. And when their personnel's not better, they struggle a ton. If you look at the Iowas of the world that still try to live in that pro style system, without personnel, they score 7 points a game. They can't dominate or manhandle people. If you want to live in a phone booth and play the game in a phone booth, well, then you better have some damn bodies that can dominate. And if you're on the defensive side of the ball and they have bodies that can dominate, I don't think there's a scheme to defend that. Unfortunately, I've been through situations where teams are 21, 22, 32 and just maul. And I played every front. I've sent every pressure. I've gapped it out. I've stunned it. I've done everything I could. You're in for a long night, no matter what you do. So to me, that kind of comes down to personnel. I don't think teams can live in that world without that personnel. If they can't handle your box and they can't block your front four, front five, front three, your second level, it's not going to work for them. I don't care what they do. So, I've always lived in a world on offense and defense. The more players in the box, the more you got to execute. If you are heavy personnel with 32 personnel and I have more backers and more linemen and more people in the box, you have to block people. The spread world is the one that scares me, because now they can get away with not blocking as many people. They're reading people. There's more space for backs to make guys miss. When you live in a phone booth, I think you've got to execute really, really well. And honestly, on offense, that's why we chose 15, 20 years ago, whatever it was, we chose to go more spread formations. I don't think spread is a philosophy. I think it's more of a formational deal than it is. I don't think spread's an offense personally, but we went to 20 personnel, 2x1, 3x1, 2x2, 10 personnel, simply because we were trying to create more space because we couldn't block guys in the box. If you're heavy 32, 22, 21, I think you've got to execute better. I think you've got to be a better coach. In a 21 system, I think you've got to be a better coach to figure out how to execute the techniques that you need to execute because there's more bodies in the box. I think wide split, spread personnel, spreading people out. I think you don't have to be as good of a coach. And that's one of the reasons we went to it, right? I didn't want to feel like I had to be the best coach in the world every week. I wanted to feel like, hey, I'm creating space for players and I'm creating running room by using formations, because if I line up in 21 and they put 9 guys in the fit, can I block all 9 of those guys? That's just my philosophy. Favorite answer was always to send the overhang. Small D got burnt by RPOs by a good duo team late. Yeah, I mean, if you send a guy off the edge, how do they handle an extra guy off the edge? Can they throw access? What are their answers in the run game? But to me, moving and pressuring as a base defense is really not a good deal. I think you move in pressure to get tackles for losses. I think you move in pressure to figure out a way to defend certain things. If you're doing that on snap one, day one, I think you're in a lot of trouble on defense. I think at some point you have to play base defense if you want to be really good. That's just my opinion. 4-2-5 over split safety quarters versus 12 personnel. I'm an over front guy. I'm a 12 personnel or a 4-2-5 quarters team. I would play quarters to everything. I would find a way to play quarters to everything. 12 personnel, why with a wing? What are they doing? How are they attacking you? Is their personnel better than yours? I had a YouTube short today that asked the question, and I asked it on Twitter. If you could only play one front all game long, what would it be? Right? You don't know the personnel. You don't have huddle tendencies. It's not down in distance. So every once in a while, I like to throw questions out there that are hypothetical, right? So normally I'll have people respond back and go, okay, well, what's the personnel? What's the formation? Yeah, that shit's great. I get it. I'm asking you a question. If you had one front that you could play and you had to defend runs, you had to defend tight end sets, you had to be able to create pressure on the quarterback, you don't know what the offense is in. It's P and 10. They're coming from the sideline. You don't know personnel. What's the front you would choose? Obviously, we all, in the world we live in now with analytics and breakdowns and editing, yeah, we're all going to play defense based off of personnel. We're all going to play fronts on down and distance and personnel. I get that. But hypothetically, if I had to ask you, you have one front that you can play. You don't know what the personnel is. You don't know what the offense does. What front would you choose? I'm not looking for an answer that says, well, coach, if they were 11, I would do this. If they were 12, I would do this. It's a hypothetical question to say you don't know what they are. What front would you play? What front gives you the most dynamic chance to defend everything, right? Sometimes when you look at hypothetical situations to answer a question, you may find out that maybe that's the front we should be using, right? It defends multiple things. To match personnel on every down, awesome. To say that you can match personnel on every down, awesome. If you live in a high school world and you can match personnel every down, God bless you. My best 11 or my best 11, I can't match personnel on every down. There's not a chance in the world. I have a third down group. I have a nickel dime group that I love. I cannot match the other team's personnel every down and distance. It's impossible. I don't have the dudes. I don't have the players. I can't do it. So hypothetically, for me, it would be over front. Now, we are a tight three high defensive system. That's what we do. I, I am smart enough and I'm logical enough to separate hypotheticals from realistic. I can't play over front at the school that I'm at right now. I can't find enough defensive linemen. But if I had a hypothetical to say P and 10, I don't know the personnel. I don't know the balls on their 30. I don't know run pass. I don't know tendencies. I'm going to play over front every day of the week. If they put a tight end in, I'm good. If they're 10 personnel, I feel good. That's the hypothetical situation where I'm going to say I would choose over front. Just my opinion, right? There's people that are going to choose bear. There's people that are going to choose. We're a tight front team that has the ability to adjust to what we see. But, when it's a comment or a question like on Twitter, I'm just trying to get people to interact. I'm trying to have fun. I want to get multiple eyes out there answering a question. Everybody's going to chime in and say, well, coach, what's the personnel? What's the formation? What are they doing? What's the huddle tendency? I would be over versus this. I'd be tight versus this. I'd be 3 down versus this and 4 down versus that. That's what we do for a living when we're coaching in season. But when it's February 1st and you're just throwing questions out there for content and answers, what if you had to live in a world where you only had one front that you could play? You don't know what the offense is going to do. They might come out in 22. They might come out in 32. They might come out in 10. Do you have a front that if you had to deal with all that, you would play? And to me, it's over. That's just my answer. That's what I would do. But I'm not an over front team. I don't play over front defense. That doesn't mean I can't answer the question, right? If that makes sense to you. All right, Patriots hit versus the Rams. The Super Bowl should be effective versus 205-1 double eagle. Yeah, if you were the Patriots and you had those dudes, there's a bunch of teams in high school that are double eagle teams. I play double eagle and we get ripped to fucking shreds. It's never been good for me. It's been an answer to certain things. It's never been a good defense for us. Double eagle, bear, we get torn to shreds with the personnel I have against the personnel I play. Maybe we don't coach it correctly. Maybe we don't do a good job with it, but just to get in bear for me has never been an answer. That's almost every defensive guy's answer. Oh, bear, double eagle. That's never been an answer for me. We played it and we get absolutely shredded. So if I was the Patriots and I had that personnel, yeah, that would probably be a great answer versus duo. For me, I played bear front and inside zones, ripped me a new ass, and ISO and other things that ripped me a new ass. Should it? Probably not. Did it? Yes, it did. Spot drop, how are you teaching your corners and safeties' eyes, reading quarterback and feeling routes in their zone? Well, for me, the corners, if we were spot drop, they would midpoint. So is 2 going vertical? Yes or no? If 2's vertical, I'm going to lean to 2. If 2's not vertical, then I'll lean back to 1. That's what we would do if we were spot drop. We would base everything off the release of number 2 with our corners if we were a spot drop team. That's how we would play it. If there's zone coverage teams would be greatly appreciated. Switching to that this year and years of. So you're talking about spot drop zones or you're talking about pattern match zones? Obviously, I think your question is about pattern match. If you guys hold that thought for 1 second, please, while I take care of something. Apologize to all you guys that are still here, but this is YouTube Live, not YouTube Edit. I am so sorry. Shit happens. But if you're still here, then I appreciate it. So if you're going to spot drop stuff from pattern match stuff, you know, the biggest thing is getting guys to understand where their drop is, where their landmark is, getting them to then square up and read off the quarterback. You then have to break off of throws, front shoulder of the quarterback, where the ball's going. You got to pull a string based on where he's looking. Um, it's understanding when you don't have to push, where you're gonna drop. For us, the problem was always from pattern matching to spot drop. We have when we pattern match, we've got to push things based on motion, where three is, where the releases are. When you spot drop, you now have to understand that if I'm a curl player and there's a flat player, regardless of the motion or what three does, I don't have to push that drop any further. I now have to relate to my drop in a curl, a curl flat hook curl scenario, to where now, based on the routes that I'm seeing, I need to drop to a spot and then relate off of that. When we're pattern matching, there are certain deals where we have to push. We've got to match, you know, for us in our basic, middle of the field open, two read stuff. Somebody's responsible for three. Somebody's responsible for three out and up. So that guy has to match the leverage of him. And then when we go to spot drop, and let's say we go to cover two stuff, and there's a flat player, and now that guy pushes, my overhang, apex, Sam, nickel, whoever you want to consider it, he no longer has to push to match the leverage of that, because he's no longer responsible for that on the wheel or the swing deep or the flat portion of it. It's going to a flat player. So to me, the biggest difference with that is understanding when you're pushing and matching, and when you're just dropping to a spot and relating to routes in an area off of that. So that would be, you got to get guys to drop to a spot and then get their eyes on the cue. You got to get guys to get depth and drop to a spot and square up so they can see the cue. So Justin, there's a few techniques there that are a little bit different. You know, for us, corner wise, to me, the easiest thing we do is we midpoint. If there's two threats and two's vertical, we lean to two. It's an inside throw, it's a shorter throw, it's an easier throw. That's what we do. The underneath guys, now we're talking about understanding how to drop to a spot, square up to the cue, melt off of his shoulder where he's looking, and then you don't break until his front hand comes off the ball. That's the way we teach it, if that helps you any. All right, 5-1 penny fronts as a change up to 3-4, mixing in cover 1 and 3 to read, using the mic as a middle lower. The question is not long and convoluted. The penny front shit to me is, I don't even know if I understand it. I read the shit on social media. I look at the PDFs and all that stuff, but I don't even know what penny front is, to be honest with you. When I look at it, it looks like they're playing 50 defense with backers mugged or something, that like it's bear with backers mugged in the B gap, but it's 50 front stuff. Like, I don't get all the penny. You'd probably have to explain to me what penny front is, because it probably, to me, is double eagle bear ish. Probably from a different personnel grouping, or probably from a situation where it's, at least when I see the PDFs and the shit that I look at, it's all right. It's Oki with two backers that are mugged in a B gap. I think it has to do with the personnel on the field, but I never really got into that terminology, so to speak. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with it, but when I look at it from what I've seen, when the people that I follow post it, you know, to me, it looks like a lot of other fronts that I've seen in my lifetime that are now getting a different name. And maybe that's because of the personnel. I don't know. I know if you're a 5-1 box, you run out of options of coverages to play. That much I know. If you're bear front and you have 5 rushers, or you have 5 guys that are not dropping out, you run out of options to play. You run out of pattern matches to play. You run out of coverages to play. So, I don't know. To me, I don't know enough about what penny front truly is, DK. So, If you want to give me an insight and help me on what you think it is and help the rest of the community here, every time I've seen Penny, it looks like a bunch of other fronts with different personnel. That's just my opinion. Static front worth investing if you don't have the length and size up front to do it in elite level, Division two college. If you don't have players, static front is by no means the way you want to go. You can only play static fronts if you've got absolute dudes. If you're static, they know where you are. They're going to block it. They're going to understand how to block it. Static front to me is not a defense to play. If you don't have dudes, you need to be completely opposite. If you don't have length and size up front, you need to be the furthest thing from static as possible. Just my opinion. Static to me is like the old Miami Hurricanes 4-3 cover 2. This is what we do. Here's where we are. Good luck blocking it. We don't have to blitz. We don't have to pressure. Our front four are going to get after your ass, and we're going to play cover 2, and our corners are going to beat the shit out of you. Have fun beating it. That, like, to me, that's my version of static. If you don't have the dudes to do that, so if you're saying you don't have length and size up front, you don't want to be static. Kirby Smart did a clinic. Awesome. He talked about it and he said it's kind of like war. If they know where your soldiers are, eventually you're going to get bombed. There's a game plan. There's a technique. There's a deal where you've got to be able to change some things up. Every offensive coordinator in the world, they draw up plays. They draw them up to 4-3. They draw them up to over front. Yeah, you know where everybody is. It's easy to block. You know, they struggle with different fronts and different leverage. And so to me, static would be, hey, my guys are really freaking good. And I don't think you can handle us in this front. Here it is. Have at it. If you're asking me, no length, no size, static would be the furthest thing that I would do. Route concepts and cover grass, in my opinion. Yeah, Tim. All right. So, you know, I agree with that in theory, but when you're spot dropping, you're not just dropping to a spot and standing on grass. You're dropping to a spot and then you're relating to where the quarterback is looking, where his front shoulder is. You're melting and moving around. I think spot drop sometimes gets a little bit of a bad connotation to it because, hey, drop to this cone and stand here. That's not really what it is. But obviously, if you want tighter throwing windows, then you should pattern match. I agree with that every day of the week. I'm never going to argue anything different. But and I've done this study, so I can 100% verify this for a fact. If you want less busts, if you want less big plays, if you want to talk about throwing windows that are a little bit bigger in 7-on-7, but they get real small in game situations, spot drop is a safer way to do things. Do you get the same throwing windows? No, I think the throwing windows are bigger in spot drop. Do you cover guys down better in pattern match? I 100% think you do. Do you bust more coverages in pattern match? 100%. My opinion, based on facts that I've studied and things that I've studied, when we pattern match, we bust way more coverages than we spot drop. So when we spot drop, we almost force the offense to beat us. When we pattern match, sometimes we let them beat us because we screw up the pattern match. And to me, once you get into games and that's not 7-on-7, I think the things that other teams do, the window of what they do gets a lot smaller. The quarterback is not sitting back there with 3 Mississippi to throw the ball. He's got a pass rush. He's got lanes. He's got to move the pocket. You know, spot dropping in the summer, 7-on-7, if you based it off of that, you'll never spot drop. You'll never call that defense or that coverage because there's more throwing windows. There's more easy throws. But knowing from doing the study of it myself personally on a full summer's worth of both, we gave up more completions when we spot dropped. We gave up more big plays when we pattern matched. We had tighter coverages when we pattern matched, but we busted more when we pattern matched. So I still firmly believe in spot dropping some deals. We're a pattern match team from day one. I'm not saying we're a spot drop team. Our cover 3 stuff is spot drop, but our middle of the field open quarters concepts are all pattern match. I 100% believe that you get tighter coverage, smaller throwing lanes when you pattern match. But I have done the research. I've studied it with my own team. And when we're pattern match, we bust more than we do when we're spot drop. So, there's positives and negatives to each one, in my opinion. So double eagle, generally speaking, would be 2-3 techniques and a nose guard. Can you play? To me, double eagle is an odd front deal. It's a nose guard and 2-3 techniques. You're reduced to both sides. It's reduction front would be reduced to one side with a shade and a 5 technique bubble, B gap bubble to the other side. Reduction would be a 5 and a 3. The bubble is the A gap. Double eagle would be reduction on both sides. So you would have a 5 technique and a 3 technique. To me, it involves a nose guard. That's just the way I interpret football. The difference between double eagle and bear to me is what you do to a tight end. So a double eagle team would play with a nose, 2-3 techniques, and a technique on the tight end that is a 7-9, whatever you want to deal with it, or however you want to look at it. Personally, bear front to me would be a nose, 2-3s, a vice player on a tight end, and a rusher outside of him. So if you want to look at it as a 6-man front, whatever the terminology is that makes it simpler for you. A lot of people confuse bear, double eagle. To me, they're two different deals. Double eagle is a nose, 2-3 techniques, 2-5 techniques, or a 5 and a 7-9 on a tight end. Bear is now double eagle, 21 personnel. I have a guy that's in a C gap or head up on a tight end, and I have a guy outside of him. That's 46 defense. That's bear defense. Double eagle, you can play double eagle without that guy, and like old school 5-3 defenses, right? Double eagle, 3 backers in the box versus 21 personnel. But there's not a guy on a tight end. It's not a 6-man front. Double bear to me becomes, in the simplest explanation, there's going to be 6 dudes up front. You're going to have a nose, 2 3s, a 5, vice, and a guy outside of that. We spill predominantly, Tim. So zone read, if you're asking me spilling power counter, down block schemes with a puller or a kick out, we're going to spill those. The issue becomes like zone read stuff. To the 3 technique side, because the B gap is closed, you probably become a surf team where you're not really chasing the dive. You're squeezing the dive, but popping on the QB. A lot of teams to the open B gap will chase the dive and scrape exchange with a backer. If it's true zone read and the entry point of the back is the opposite A gap, teams to the 3 technique side feel like they can't cancel enough of those gaps out. So with the A gap open to that side, they feel like the 5 techniques got to go too far to cancel the A gap. So normally what would happen is you would probably surf one back zone read stuff to the 3 technique, but you might scrape exchange it to the open B gap is kind of I don't know if that's simplistic or not, but to me, the easiest explanation I can give you, most people open B gap side, they scrape exchange or they play the D end on a dive and a backer on the quarterback. Most people to a 3 and a 5 technique. Tony, how are you, my friend? To the 3 and a 5, they might surf it so that the backer can fit the A gap inside and the D end is still responsible for the quarterback. Surf technique is not mesh charge. So what you're talking about, Tim, would be a mesh charge technique where you are attacking the mesh. A surf technique would be more at the line of scrimmage, hip square, shuffling down inside, trying to take away cutback, trying to force the ball to go front side. and then still being able to play the quarterback on the pull because your hips and shoulders are square. Um, a scrape exchange chase technique would be versus an inside block, a down block. You are physically going to turn your shoulders and run to the dive, which is going to make the quarterback pull the ball. So, um, to me, the way I look at it, when the DN surfs, he's not attacking the mesh. That would be mesh charge. Um, Different philosophy, different theory of how you're playing it. Probably need to account for the quarterback with somebody else, because if you mesh charge and he pulls, that's certainly an option. You're hoping that you um, affect the read, the pull, the path, that guys can probably rally to that and get there if the quarterback has to pull it. But most of the time, a surf technique would be at the line of scrimmage, hips and shoulders square, shuffling inside to take away the cutback, front side bounce, however you want to look at it, depending on zone or duo, and then still being able to play the quarterback. So most even front teams to the 3 technique, they surf to the 5 to the open B gap side. They usually chase, or they scrape exchange, where the end plays the inside part and the backer plays the outside part. You don't have to play it exactly that way. You can play it however you want, as long as you feel like you can handle a dive and you can handle a pull. You can change it up call to call. You can have ways to the open B gap where you chase it. You can also have ways where you sit it, and the end is now the surf quarterback player. So that's your choice as a defensive coordinator. But camp rules, basically speaking, most of the people that I talk to deal with, to the 3 technique, they surf to the open B gap, they scrape exchange. All great questions. All questions that are great for conversation, great for, um, settings like this where we're just shooting the shit of ball between people, and usually that's the world you live in. 3 technique, open A gap, you surf, open B gap, you scrape exchange. That's just traditional. Then you can change it to the open B gap where you can 2 gap the end. So now if he gets, a block that's inside or away from him, he can squeeze and the backer will scrape. If he gets an out block or a base block, now he's going to play the C gap and the backer is going to fit the B gap inside of that. So, veer release reads, tackle reads, however you want to look at it. All versions of how people have played the zone read teams, and teams that can change how they block the backside. So you see a veer release inside, and then you see a base release. So you probably fit that. Usually the read is off the tackle. Your backer would probably be reading, if he's surface reading or whatever he's reading. A lot of times, if you're going to scrape exchange, he needs to understand what the tackle's doing, because a tackle veer inside is going to scrape exchange, but a tackle that bases or blocks out might be a downhill plug fit. So different ways to fit it. Not everybody fits it the same. Not everybody plays it the same. But you usually have 2 scenarios for how you handle that. You're chasing the end, exchanging with the backer. You're sitting the end and plugging with the backer. What is your favorite quarters, 3x1? Our base day one is what we call mix. What I think, don't know exactly the Saban terminology would probably be stubby. I think I don't know exactly what it is. I'm an Alabama fan. It sucks that I can't say that I know exactly what it is, but there's so many terms out there that I confuse them all the time. So for us, base 3x1, X out 1, read on 2 and 3, backside plays 2 for 1, 3 for 2. We never borrow the backside safety over to the front side. That's our base adjustment. We don't. You have to carry another adjustment, though. You can't live in that. Base day one, camp rules, that's what we do. Next thing we do is we flood the trips, play man to the single. I think offense is, in general, the way I view offense is when you're 3x1, they look at the backside safety. Do you borrow them? Yes or no? If you borrow them, now you're going to attack the single side. If you don't borrow them, now you're going to try and attack the trip side. So from an offensive standpoint, the easiest way to look at it, or the easiest way to teach a quarterback in 3x1 deals, is where's the backside safety? If the backside safety is borrowed, This is what we want to do. If the backside safety is not borrowed, this is what we want to do. So, 3x1 for us, quarters deal, middle of the field open coverage. We 100% day one play our version of what we call mixed coverage. Maybe maybe they call it special. I don't know what the hell they call it. For us, we call it mix, and it's man on one, palms on 2 and 3. Apex is in between 3 and the offensive tackle. He's got the back out if 4 is strong. He's the push player if 4 strong. If they're 4 strong, then we got to add an inside backer to the drop to make it 5 on 4, because now the backside only needs to be 2 on 1 because they can't get 3 weak if they're 4 strong and 3x1. So just the way I approach it, just the way I look at it, camp rules day one, how we do things. 4 strong, we're going to get 5 for 4. 3 strong, 2 weak, we're going to get 4 for 3, 2 for 1. We always want +1 somewhere in coverage. So where the back is, where the back can get to, can they get to 4 strong? That has a lot to do with what we do. Our 3x1 checks don't really change depending on the run game of what they're trying to do. We may check 3x1 based on where the back is. So if the back is to the trips, we might have a call. If the back is away from the trips, we might have a call. If you're asking me camp rules day one, then our base coverage that we put in is what we call mix. And, it's X out on 1, palms, or 2 read on 2 and 3 with my nickel and my high safety. That's what we do. So great question. All the questions tonight, all the comments tonight have been absolutely phenomenal. And that's why we do this every week, right? We do it to get with the community, talk about things. Same thing I do on Twitter. This time of year, I'm constantly throwing questions out on Twitter. A lot of them are hypothetical. Hey, give me your best run concept. Well, I know most guys are going to say, all right, well, coach, are we 10 personnel, 20 personnel, 11 personnel? What's the defense? What's the front? I'm not asking you that. What's your best run concept? What do you love doing the most? Are you a power guy, a gap guy, a zone guy? All the other things, like I don't think I can, especially on Twitter, X, whatever you want to deal, however you want to call that platform. I only have so many characters I can ask a question in. So if I'm trying to just get people interested in answering questions, I can't lay out the whole scenario for you. That to me is what July through December is for. Huddle, game film, everything else. But if I'm asking you, hey, offensively, you hang your hat on one play, what is it? I don't care what the front is. I don't care what the personnel is. If you're a gap guy and you're a power guy, then power should be your answer. I don't need to know what the front is. I don't need to know what the personnel is. I realize in the coaching world that a lot of the things we do are going to be based on fronts, coverages, leverage. But if I had to ask you at a clinic in February, who are you? Where do you hang your hat? What's your base play? I don't need to have 30 scenarios for you to tell me your base play. If I ask you what you think your best front is, you don't know what their personnel is. You don't know if they're 10 or 11. You don't know if they're a gap scheme or a zone scheme. You don't know what they do in the passing game. They're coming from the sideline. You don't know what they do. You have no film. What front would you play? Is that a hypothetical? Yes, it's a hypothetical. Is that the world we live in all the time? No, because we have film, we have everything else. But if you just asked a question and said, all right, look, you got one front, what would you choose? I would tell you over front. I would tell you, and I would say, look, I'm going to be an over front team. I'm going to be that structure, because if they have a tight end, I feel good. If they don't have a tight end, I feel good. If you ask me how we play defense, we play 3 down, tight front, 3 high. That's how we play defense. To me at least, I can answer questions hypothetically. I don't need a scenario. I don't need a down and distance. I don't need I don't need the exact situation drawn up to answer your question, because I know that when we actually coach, I know we're going to look at all those things. I know that we're going to take all that information into account. But if it's February 1st and the question is, what is the front you would play if you didn't have that information? You still should be able to give an answer, right? If you're bear front and you say, fuck it, we're bear, I don't give a shit what you come out in, well, then that should be your answer. If you're a 3-4 guy and you say, all right, well, look, I'm going to play Okie 3-4, and depending on the personnel, I might send a fourth, I might drop a backer down, well, then that's your answer, right? You don't need to know the exact down distance scenario to come up with a hypothetical answer. You should have at least a hang your hat deal that says, look, this is where we hang our hat. If we didn't know any different, we would be an over front team. We would be an under front team. We would be a 3-3 stack or a 5-0-5 team. You should still be able to answer that without needing all of the specifics for the situation. Like I realize when we coach, that's what we're going to do. I get it. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, like last week, I asked, what's your favorite passing concept? I don't care about down and distance. I don't care about which way the wind's blowing. I don't care about where the football is. Day one, hang your hat, best route concept, give it to me. Is it mesh? Is it 3-man scat? Is it 4 verticals? Yeah, based on the coverage, you might make a different call. Based on the coverage, you might like something different. But if you had to choose one concept that you had to teach and you felt like, I don't know what they're coming out in, I can run this concept versus everything and I feel okay, do you have an answer? Or is your answer always, well, if they're nickel rotating strong, I'm throwing this. If they're that, yeah, that's the world we live in as coaches. That's I get that. I understand that. But just hypothetically, one deal, what is it? Who are you? What is your bread and butter? Palms 2x2. Do you have a corners, jump outs, and bubbles by 2, or the nickel buzz, the flats late? We game plan how we handle 2 out. There's teams where if we're playing teams that throw a bunch of bubbles and we need to trigger 2 to the flat with the corner immediately, we will. Base rule for me, we do not trigger 2 to the flat immediately. If 2 goes to the flat, the corner then sits and plays off the release of the quarterback, which if he's looking at 2, he should be able to see the quarterback. So the quarterback will throw him down to the flat. If it's a team that wants to live with 2 on the bubble, then we're going to trigger right now. So to me, that's a game plan deal. Base rule, camp rules, day one, 2 to the flat, corner sets his feet, settles, waits for the ball to bring him down. He defends the whole shot of the vertical by 1. So if we got vertical by 1, bubble by 2, the corner would shuffle out. When 2 goes to the flat, he will sit, read the quarterback, defend the whole shot if he can, rally down to the bubble late. If a team is their best dudes at 2 and they throw bubbles to 2 all the time, we're going to trigger it right now. That's how we do it. Great thought. The exercise. Yeah, Tony. It's not only to me. It's not only a great exercise. To me, it's a way to generate interest in the offseason to say, all right, look, I can't type in 30,000 characters to give you the down distance scenario, who they have in the game. That's all the shit we do during the season. If it's February 1st and I want to generate interest on Twitter, all right, well, there is no situation. Give me your best front. Give me your best coverage. Give me your best blitz. Give me your best run concept. Give me your best pass concept. Like, we live in a world where we're always going to analyze data. We're always going to analyze situations. And when you coach in July, August, September, October, then do that. February 1st, I ask you what your best front is. You should be able to tell me what you would play regardless of what the offense does, right? You should be able to tell me this is where I'm most comfortable. Do you want to get pinpointed into down and distance and what's the score of the game? What's the emotion and the adrenaline of the game? I get all that. That's what we do every day. Hypothetically, February 1st, if I say, hey, give me your base front to anything, what would you play? You should at least be able to answer that, right? You shouldn't have to tell me, well, coach, I want to play this front, but if they come out in 11, I'm going to play this. If they come out in 22, I'm going to play this. I understand that as a football coach. I've been doing this a long time. I get that that's where the world we live in. But February 1st, to ask a question and say, hey, you only have one front, what would you do? I think you should still be able to answer that without telling me all the situations involved. You ever have issues with your cornerback getting confused, jumping a bubble or rally since it changes week to week, kind of like you talked about being concerned with at the end? Yeah, we certainly have issues with that. And I'm only going to change that if I absolutely have to. If they absolutely hammer the bubble, hammer 2 to the flat, and I got to make a change, I'm going to change that if and when I absolutely need to. To be honest with you, Philly, there's weeks where we'll just play cover 2 to those schools because we'll take the thought of the cornerback out of it and we'll just put him in the flat. So we also change coverage based on what we're seeing. So, a lot of innuendos that go into it, a lot of thoughts and film study and things like that go into it. So if I feel like they're a team that's hammering 2 to the flat, if it's especially into the boundary, we may just play cover 2 to the boundary that week and say, hey, look, they're not throwing the bubble. we're playing cover two. You don't even have a choice to play two read or palms into the boundary. This is the check. We've done that before too. So, been on for an hour and 5 minutes, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do. If you got on here late and you have questions, ask them. If I can get back to them later, I'll try to get back to them. But again, appreciate everything you guys do. Tonight was another phenomenal interaction with people. I love your questions. I love everything you guys do. Hopefully, you guys understand that when I give you answers, I give them to you opinion based. I give them to you based on my 25 years of football experience in high school. I try not to be a PDF guy. I try not to be an Alabama guy. I try not to be an NFL guy. I'm just trying to give you what I think is best for us in the world that we live in. What we want to do and what we need to do are two different things. We're high school football coaches. We want to do a lot of things. We want to study theory. We want to do all the things that are cool. At the end of the day, you got to do what works. So I try to give you my opinion as a high school football coach, and hopefully you understand that. And hopefully you're here for that reason. If you wanted a PDF or something else, there's other people that do that. So again, appreciate everything you guys do for me all the time. Appreciate you being a follower, subscriber of PlayFast. Hopefully we can give you back something that is worth your while if you're coming here. You guys commenting, asking questions makes YouTube live. So every time we do YouTube live, please ask a question. Please comment. You may not get the response you want. You may not get the response that you thought you were going to get, but I'm going to give you my opinion and I'm going to give it to you straightforward every time. So thank you for commenting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for following. Remember, you won't play well until you play fast. Love you guys. Love the fact that you coach football. Love the fact that you love football. I will see you guys sometime next week and we'll talk about the Super Bowl. Thank you, Justin. See you, bud.